Okay, I think we'll get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Joanne Gabriel, and on behalf of Darien Library, I want to welcome you to this evening's program, all about seeds, seed saving with Epic Tomatoes, Craig LeHoullier. So, you had a great summer, and you want to make sure you grow your winners next year. So, just how do you save the seeds? This question and many more will be answered with North Carolina's tomato man, Dr. Craig LeHoullier, who is a certified expert in this subject. Before we begin, I'd like to mention that programs at Darien Library are made possible by the annual Friends of the Library campaign. We thank you for your support to make programs like this possible and our collections available to the community. Our presenter this evening is the author of two best-selling books on gardening, Epic Tomatoes and Growing Vegetables in Straw Bales. His gardening obsession began in 1981 when he began tending his first garden with wife Susan. He soon joined Seed Savers Exchange, becoming an advisor for tomatoes and becoming responsible for naming and popularizing many well-known tomato varieties. He is an amateur tomato breeder who continues to co-lead the Dwarf Tomato Project, a unique worldwide volunteer tomato breeding project that brings great tomatoes to those who choose or require container gardening. A popular lecturer across the country at major gardening events, as well as a frequent guest on podcasts and radio shows, and of course, Instagram. Please welcome Craig LeHoullier.
Thank you, Joanne. It's such a delight to collaborate and do one of these again, and wondering who the heck that guy was that you talked about there. So anyway, hey everybody, and welcome. It's I love doing these Zooms from the comfort of my office. It means I don't have to get in a plane and stay in a hotel. Um, but this is the last of my PJ evening series Zooms from my office here in Hendersonville. So I hope you enjoy it. I was really excited when Joanne asked me to do this particular topic, which I pulled together with some slight modifications at her request. I've given a Zoom on seeds once before to a group in Oregon, and it was a lot of fun. A lot of groups want to hear about tomatoes, or they want to hear about straw bale gardening or container gardening, but some of my favorite fringy topics, the Dwarf Tomato Project, the history of gardening, and the seeds one, um, maybe because they're a little bit different, they keep me on my toes a little bit, but it gives me a chance to share all kinds of information. So as those of you who have seen me on Zooms before, you know that I like to start out showing a little bit about what it's like in our garden right now. And I want to do just a little bit of a time lapse here because it's the end of the gardening season for me. I'm sure for many of you, you may be right in the midst of it or maybe at the end. But let's take you back to late July, which is right around the time when I was picking my first ripe tomato. And this is what my garden in the backyard looked like. In the front right, the green beans were just about starting to tire out a little bit, but to their left was far too many summer squash. There's also cucumbers and melons and peppers and eggplant and tomatoes. So think about this. That was late July. This was 1 month later. So one of the things I've learned about in gardening in Hendersonville is the season here is highly compressed. Part of this is due to weather. When we have our last frost, when we can get things out, the amount of sun in our yard, which even though it's quite extensive, as the season runs on, the angles become a little more acute, the intensity is a little bit less, and then humidity and temperature pop up in August and more frequent rains, meaning disease comes in. So what you're seeing here was an incredibly outstanding yield of tomatoes. It was a highly successful season, but then this is what it looked like a month later. And I think some of you who've been following me on Instagram know that I had responsibility for a greenhouse where we grew tomatoes down the road. It was the Veterans Healing Farm, a volunteer opportunity I had. So 70 tomato plants here in my yard, about 115 there. So it was a busy summer. So a few days after this, which didn't look that aesthetic, um, all of the tomato plants and cages were pulled and a few things were left. Then a few days after that, all of the straw bales were removed and put behind our shed. Coda actually is one of our three dogs who is responsible for keeping our straw bales well supplied with nitrogen throughout the season. And they love to use our garden as a maze. So, what was the result of this garden? This was just a portion of the day that I picked 125 pounds of tomatoes. And this can be a really horrifying experience because, as you see, a lot of these are dead ripe, meaning they don't have great shelf life. So, what do? You get busy canning. And this really is the outcome of a season where we canned 9 times, 7 quarts a run, 63 quarts of tomatoes. We did, I think, 8 pints of sauce. We froze tomato sauce. We froze slow roasted tomatoes. So it was all a lot of fun. But let's get into the content now. Seeds and all kinds of aspects of seeds. We're going to really take you around the world and look at different facets of seeds in terms of history and some saving and some things to watch out for. Even a peek at what goes on behind the scenes at a seed company that I'll tell you about. But all my seed is saved now. And I think I have, with fruit that people have shared with me, I've probably got 190 or 195 coin envelopes of saved seed, tomato seed, eggplant, and peppers. So here we go. This is a great time to be a gardener, just because of the amazing array of things that we get to grow of every crop. Now, a lot of you know that tomatoes is my specialty, but it doesn't matter what you like to grow. We just have a lot of options. However, because seeds have become expensive, in some cases, as you'll see on one of my slides, some seeds are starting to just run into the outrageous. And I'm sure there's some good reasons for that. I'll share some of those reasons actually that I'm aware of. We need to be aware of how we choose our seed. We need to know how best to store not only the seeds we save, but the seeds that we purchase. We also need to know that different seeds have different longevity, and we'll get through all of that. So some of you may not even start certain things from seed, but this talk is still for you because we're going to talk just in terms of generalities around a lot of different types of seed. The reason I put this slide in there is just to reinforce the idea that it's fine to go to a local farmer's market or a big box store or a nursery and to get lots of your plants as starts. It may be just due to the space that you have or your confidence as a seed starter or just the time you have or the type of job you have that gives you the time to do it. However, to get the widest variety of anything to grow, you really do want to start with seeds. And this is particularly true of things like tomatoes, where if you go to a greenhouse, you may get 50 types of tomato varieties, where if you're a Seed Savers Exchange member, you may be completely overwhelmed and have 10 or 12,000 to choose from. So because there are lots of different sources of seed, and as you can see here, I've got some Victory seed packets, I've got West Coast seeds, I've got Hudson Seed Library. There's lots of decisions, but let's go way, way, way back. So the very first United States seed catalog was actually a 1784 Landreth. Now, I couldn't find a copy of that digitized anywhere. So what I have here is one that's only 20 years after that, which is the McMahon Seed Company of Philadelphia. Many of the older seed companies that got going from the late 1700s right up through the mid 1900s have been swallowed up by big conglomerates or they've merged. it's really fun to go through the Gilbert resource that's on the web where you can look through 70, 80,000 different digitized seed catalogs. And what this shows from 1804, this was the oldest seed catalog I could find digitized, by the way, is how little information they actually held. A lot of times they just had scientific names, no descriptions. Let's go forward to 1820 and look at a company that was really popular out of New York called Thorburn. And we have the name of the varieties and yellow Dutch, yellow Maltese, yellow Aberdeen. It would be really nice to know um, what the descriptions of these were. And I believe these might have been turnip or squash. But right in the middle there is tomato or love apple. One variety, just tomato. So things have come a long way. What's really interesting about looking through old seed catalogs is you essentially get the history of gardening in our country by looking at which varieties were sold and carried on which dates. And in this way, you can get a sense of what varieties may have been in your great grandparents and parents' gardens. In your parents' gardens, the search for doing so is actually one of the things that got me into heirlooms in the first place. And the sweet spot of seed catalogs for drawings and illustrations and diversity of varieties really is 1870 to 1950. After that, it was mostly photographs. And after that is really when hybrids started becoming the focus. Now, this is a slide that I like to use in my garden history talk because it really shows the effect of the formation of the Seed Savers Exchange in reversing the fate of our 9 non-hybrid vegetables. And really the number to look at are the yellow ones. You can look at the date at the top. When I put this slide together, I researched a variety of crops, went through catalogs for different milestone dates, 1860, 1908, mid-1900s, and recent, to try to get a sense of what people were growing in terms of the types. And the biggest diversity in the 1860s was amongst pea varieties. In the early 1900s, it was melons. And the mid-1900s, it was beans. And actually, it wasn't until very, very recently when tomatoes really came to the fore, especially around the specialty seed catalogs, not just the catalogs that focus on hybrids, but ones that have a diversity. But if you look at the bottom number, things were climbing nicely. Gardeners could get 255 different varieties of the above crops in 1860, 567 in 1908, and boom, hybrids started becoming the things that were sold in catalogs, which meant the disappearance of non-hybrid varieties, which is why it dropped to 255. Things are not that much better in catalogs that focus on hybrids, but if you look at a catalog like Johnny's that has a big influx of non-hybrid varieties as well, you can grow 528 different of those, and that was 2019. Johnny's is getting to be more and more like a phone book, so they're just increasing the varieties they sell every year. 1975 is when this happened, because when Kent Wheely and his wife Diane formed the Seed Savers Exchange, they created a mechanism by which gardeners could share seeds that maybe they were the only one in their town or their state that had. And this is how the numbers of varieties started proliferating. And this is why companies like Southern Exposure Seed Exchange and Victory had all the material to be able to offer. This is an interesting slide because any of you who have grown the incredible watermelon, Sun, Moon, and Stars, Kent Wheely discovered it growing in a farm very near where he had formed the Seed Savers Exchange in Missouri. Turns out this was a variety that was offered by the Henderson Seed Company in 1924. It wasn't sold for that many years. It essentially disappeared. Kent actually thought it was extinct until he realized that there was one farmer growing it in Missouri, and probably the only person in the world that had it, and now we can all grow. So we all know what happens in the spring, right? When the seed, or maybe the winter, when the seed catalogs start coming in. And gosh, we have so many types of seed catalogs these days. We have, and none of this talk is really going to make judgments on the quality of the seed companies. This is me just portraying different types of seed companies that are available for us to use. And I'll show a tool later on that if you're interested in finding objective assessments of the seeds that they sell and the quality and the accuracy, there's a site you can visit. But you have Burpee. And when I started gardening, it was with my dad when I was 6, and he got the Burpee catalog in the mail every year. Stokes, and I ordered a lot of seeds from Stokes all through my early years of gardening. Then you had the medium-sized companies such as the seed sales end of the Seed Savers Exchange, not the exchange of trading seeds, but the commercial end, which actually sells seeds. And just about everybody knows about Baker Creek. They tend to focus on non-hybrid varieties, unlike the big companies like Stokes and Burpee. Like I've said before, Johnny's is in a class of its own. They really seem to pride themselves in being quite cutting edge. And you can always tell by looking at their catalogs what the trends are. For example, right now they're heavily into microgreens and different lettuces, probably reflecting on what a lot of farms want to grow so that they can supply a lot of the restaurants that want to feature these types of things. Then you have the companies that really do focus almost exclusively on heirlooms / open pollinated varieties. Things may be changing a little bit with Victory Seeds, and we'll talk about them in a bit because they have changed ownership. Although they, as far as I can tell, they have not changed philosophy and quality. Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, and I'll always have a fond spot in my heart for them because they actually are the company that first offered Cherokee Purple to the world when I sent seed to the owner at the time, Jeff McCormick, in 1991. Then he grew the seed up for sufficient supply to release, and he released it in 1993. And my friend Ira Wallace now runs it, and I know a lot of the people involved there, and it's just a great seed company. And then we get into some of the more regional companies that are identified with the region of the country, such as Adaptive Seeds in Oregon. And I've gotten to meet um, the people that run that at a conference. Really, really nice, really forward-thinking. Territorial is also in the Pacific Northwest. But then you have some that are in the Northeast, such as Fedco and High Mowing, Fruition, which is in the New York area, Nichols, which is in Oregon. So the sky is the limit. Then we have the crop specialists, such as Tomato Grower Supply. And in fact, there also used to be a company called the Tomato Seed Company, which is where I got a lot of my heirlooms for the first time back in 1987. They are no longer. And then Totally Tomatoes that I'm sure a lot of people know about. And then you get other specialists, such as those who specialize in herbs, such as Nichols in Oregon. And I've bought so much different types of basil from them. And a company that I don't think operates as they originally did, but the Vermont Bean Seed Company obviously focused on bean seeds. And I think they're one of the companies that have been swallowed up by other companies to become part of kind of a conglomerate. But it was really, I really enjoyed getting the Vermont bean seed catalog in years ago when I first started gardening. So let's talk about Victory Seeds just for a little while. And Mike Dunton and I met online in a shared search for old Livingston varieties back in probably the early 2000s, and we've become friends and we've met. And Mike and his wife Denise ran Victory right through COVID, and it almost ran them into the ground just because difficulty in finding help and just the fact that they're not getting any younger either. And They wanted to have some vacations and do some fun things. So they were looking for the perfect partner, and it was purchased by Dave Whitinger. And Dave is Dave of Dave's Garden and National Gardening Association. And Dave and I have become friends, and it's being run now out of the Austin, Texas, Dallas, Texas area. And so but I did this talk in last year to a group in Oregon, and Mike actually joined me, and he talked me through a little bit about how they do this at Victory. So I thought I would share with you what it looks like at a smaller seed company. And Mike had two gardens about this size where he grew out a lot of his seeds. And as you'll hear in a few slides, this is kind of rare. A lot of companies do not grow any of their seeds, but they bring it all in on contract. This is a really nice looking picture in the wintertime taken of the Victory Garden Seed House. All of these slides were shared with me by Mike. And they don't automate a lot of things. When it's time to save tomato seeds, you sit around the table. This is Mike's wife, Denise, on the right, and one of his daughters in the center. And they just do a lot of squeezing of tomato pulp together. We'll talk about the fermentation process a little bit later in the talk. But I always thought running a seed company may be fun, but then I have some friends who have ventured into creating really small seed companies, and they've shared with me the fact that it's not all fun and games. It's not all just growing gardens and tasting fruit. It is getting a lot of orders in and having to go in and take these tiny little seeds and then pack them into your packets and be really accurate about it. And then there's the system that you have to have where everything sits in a temperature controlled warehouse. So when the orders come in, people can actually find the seeds that you're to be sent. And then there's the process of addressing the envelopes that come in and then filling them and then getting them ready for the post office to pick up. So a lot of work goes into bringing you those seeds. So that was a smaller company like Victory. And what's happened is other companies have popped up that produce more commercial quantities of seed. In fact, these may be the companies that supply seeds to the smaller companies that they then sell to you, such as Seeds by Design in California, which has been going for a long time. They actually were responsible for growing a lot of the heirloom tomato seeds that you ordered from lots of different seed catalogs. Kent Wheatley's son, Aaron, has actually formed a seed company. There's Restoration Seeds. So these are bigger companies. I'm not truly sure in all of these cases. I believe that all three of these do grow a lot of their own, particularly tomato seeds, but I'm not sure about other. And then maybe a more challenging thing to talk about is how we all know how companies that have been involved with creating fertilizers and herbicides and pesticides often end up buying up and consolidating lots of the smaller seed companies. The smaller seed companies can't really make it because of economics. And then the bigger companies can come in and then, they're selling their special herbicide to be grown with a special um, variety of wheat or soybeans, et cetera. We've all heard about those stories. Not that, so I'm not demonizing anything here. What I'm talking about is how a lot of times what sounds like a really quaint seed company name has been swallowed up and they're actually run by petrochemical companies. So it's just the time that we're living in. It's all about profit, I guess. So let's talk briefly about, we're going to look at some pages in some seed catalogs and help navigate our way through. And this is something that I'm not really happy that started happening in the last few years. But if you look at that top variety, Marvori, and it is a hybrid version of a white tomato. And, you read it, ivory skin, pronounced ribs, invoke the classic heirlooms such as great white or Lillian's yellow. 1955 for a packet of hybrid seeds, 50 seeds for $64.95. So now there's a few things that have gone into this. For a long time, breeders have not really been adequately compensated for their work. And there's another aspect, and I was in big pharma for 25 years, and a lot of times they price medicines with this saying, we will charge what the market will bear. So it's not always about what it costs to develop a medicine, just like it's probably not always about what it costs to develop a seed. It's if we tantalize people with particular descriptions or they have particular needs, let's see what we can charge for this seed. Now, as someone who focuses on heirlooms, open pollinated varieties, the only hybrid seed that I buy is Sun Gold. And I do buy it from Johnny Selected Seeds. They are the first company to have sold it back in the late 1980s. I've gotten it over the years from other sources, and I've found it has not had the same specific flavor characteristic I'm looking for. Johnny's actually got it from, and a UK company called Thompson and Morgan both received their seeds from an Asian company that produces it. And all of these are hybrids, Marvori F1, as you can see, Marbone F1, Margold F1. We don't know what the parents are because that's part of a hybrid is they're patented and it's a secret. It's like Coke. You don't know how we make Coca-Cola because that formula is patented. We don't know how they create hybrid tomatoes because they're patented. So here's another reason why hybrid seeds are more expensive. It's because every seed in the packet comes from physical labor. So somewhere in a greenhouse, typically in Asia or Europe, because that's where a lot of this work is done, somebody is growing lots of plants of the two varieties that they want to hybridize. They know that if variety A is crossed with variety B, the seeds that are produced in the tomato that will grow a plant that's greater than the sum of its parts, which is exactly what the case is with Sun Gold. So somebody is going around and buzzing flowers and collecting pollen, and then they're going to the mother variety and they're removing the anthers very carefully. And this is really sensitive work. And then they're dipping that center flower part, the pistil, into the pollen. If a tomato forms, those are the hybrid seeds that end up in your packet. So one of the things that I've done through the years is looked at, can I get smaller packets of seed for a better price? And this is a page from Pine Tree Garden Seeds. I found the quality of pine tree really good. They have a diverse set of all types of varieties of pretty much everything. I get lettuce from them, and I've bought carrots, and I've bought beans and basil, except you can buy packets of seed typically for between $2 and $3. And this is great because, as we'll talk about in a little while, seeds last longer than just that season. So if you buy a packet and it has 25 tomato seeds in it, you don't toss whatever you don't plant because those will be good for 10 to 12 to 14 years. If you're a Seed Savers Exchange member, this may be how you order your seeds, and this is certainly how I ordered most of my tomato and pepper and eggplant seed collection, was they have a yearbook, and as I said, Seed Savers is a mechanism for sharing. So it's all codes. So if I look, I think I picked this out because Cherokee Purple is in it. No, Cherokee Chocolate's in it. So if you look down at the bottom of that, it says Cherokee Chocolate, and somebody with the code ILKED, and I know from experience that's a fellow named Don Kellums, he has this. So if I go to the front of the book, I can find his name and address, send him a self-addressed stamped envelope with a request saying, I would like a sample of Cherokee Chocolate. And a week or two later, you back at the time it was including $1 or $2. Now I think it's including $3 or $4 because postage has gone up, and they want to reimburse the seed savers for all of the effort of doing the seed saving and the materials, but you get your seeds. And what's interesting is Seed Savers has kept a um, a library of a lot of varieties. And so I was looking for a bean named Marabelle that I had let go. It went dead. I had had it too long. So I called my friends at Seed Savers, and they said, "We have Marabelle." And a week later, I got some, and it turns out it was seed that I had saved and sent them 25 years ago that they sent me, and it grew beautifully. And I've gotten 2 tomatoes from them this year that I had lost. Now, what about buying seeds from big box stores when you, or nurseries or garden shops where you see the big racks? A lot of times you see pretty generic types of seeds, the companies such as Northrop King or Ferry Morse, and you don't have a ton of diversity in varieties. Sometimes companies such as Southern Exposure, or in my area, So True Seed, will actually have a rack there with a lot of their varieties. It's fine. Here's what you're trusting, that these seeds have been treated well from the time they left the factory of the seed company till the time that they have been in the store. And the enemy of seeds is moisture, and they don't like temperature variations either. And several times I've gone and bought packets of bean seeds and some other varieties from stores that had very, very poor germination. And I'll bet it's because they weren't handled very well in between. But if you're in a store, you see something you like at the end of the season, if seeds are on sale and you can pick up a few packets, I would say go for it. You'll know when you grow those how well the germination is. So I wouldn't base my whole garden on the fact that those seeds that you buy off a rack are going to germinate successfully. What about seed libraries? Um, the romantic in me, the seed saver in me, loves the concept of seed libraries. I think they're a wonderful idea. And I think just the fact that they are being battled in various cities means that we have to support their existence. And they're being battled because um, it may be the extension services or maybe seed companies are passing the word that, well, they may get disease seed, or they may not be growing what they know. But I think that's a poor excuse to block the sharing of seeds. And so much goes into creating a rack like this. Some gardener somewhere has either extra seed that they take the time to package up, take the time to label, or they grow it out and they package up their saved seeds and they bring it to the library. People who may be financially struggling go to the seed library and get seeds for their garden. And then if they have a successful year, they can save seeds and bring it back. So it's just a wonderful concept. I have one single caveat, and that is if you have gardeners that don't fully understand the concept of hybrid and heirloom, and some of the seeds they're growing are hybrids, and they save those seeds and then return saved seed of that variety to the library, it is not what, and if they label it the same as what that hybrid packet said, it's not that hybrid anymore. It is an F2 generation adventure of all kinds of things that can emerge between the two parents. So if you're a seed saver and want to maintain varieties, then it's probably not a good time to have the foundation of your garden as things acquired at a seed library, unless it's clear that those seeds are from a seed company. But if you want to fill in spaces, if you want to just take a chance and see what you get for certain varieties, particularly if you know that it is seed safe from a hybrid, that could be a starting point for a new variety. But I love the concept. I wish every library in the country had them. So this is even a dicier place, I think, to get seeds from, which is eBay, Amazon, Etsy, you name it, because now we really don't know, especially if these are seeds that are just being offered by seed savers. I've seen so many incorrect pictures. I've seen so many incorrect descriptions. I've seen reviews of seeds received by people where they don't have good germination. So this is definitely a buyer beware situation. If you're involved in selling seeds on eBay and Amazon, that's fine. You understand the quality of what you're selling, and you're going to have happy customers. It's just for those of us who are starting from seed, this would probably be the last place I would go to find my seeds. Now, this is an important question, and I've gotten a lot of questions over the year. I live in Texas. Is it important for me to have a Texas seed company where I buy my seed from? And because of what I talked about earlier, seed companies, no matter where, are getting their seeds from everywhere. So what you grow from a seed company in Oregon or Texas or Connecticut is likely not necessarily going to be locally adapted to grow well in your area. It's still going to be up to you to get a variety or various varieties, grow them in your garden, and read the descriptions, maybe look at the reviews on some of these and see what other people have said about it, particularly in your area. Um, but to grow successful varieties in Oregon doesn't mean you have to go to adaptive seeds to get your varieties. And I've had many chats with Mike Dunton when he owned Victory and how he's trying to get people to understand that many of these seeds that are in just about most catalogs, many of them are produced in Europe or Asia, and it's just fine. So now let's get a little bit into the nitty-gritty of saving seeds, and we'll focus on tomatoes, but I can mention a few other types. So pretty easy, and I am a tomato seed fermenter. It's the way I've done it from the beginning. It's a lot of fun. It smells really bad, which can lead to some interesting conversations. Um, but it's just, and you feel like you're getting your fingers into something. And, it's cutting a tomato in half that it's perfect, ripe, edible condition, squeezing it in a labeled cup. And then in the lower left, you're sitting it in a warm place for about 2 or 3 or 4 days. I like to cover it with a paper towel because the flies are going to be fascinated with the smell as the pulp starts to ferment, and they're going to want to get in there and lay eggs. But you don't want to let it go more than 2, 3, or 4 days, particularly if it's warm. Each seed is surrounded by gel. The gel protects a germination inhibitor that is painted on each seed. The fermentation breaks down the gel. So once that breaks down, which happens pretty quickly, that tomato seed is now sitting in a total wet environment. And if you let it go for 4 or 5 days up to a week, you'll start seeing a cup of little tomato plants and your seed saving will be ruined. So then you bring it in the house and fill the cup with water and stir it around really good. What's nice is that your good seeds will sink to the bottom of the cup. And what I typically do is decant off as carefully as I can all of the stuff that's floating at the top. And you may see some undeveloped seeds. You'll see chunks of gel. If you haven't gone for long enough, you may see some really good looking seeds that are still in the gel, and I just reach my hands in and squish them. The gel comes away, the seeds fall to the bottom. You repeat that a few times until you get to the state where you're in the lower right. You get really nice clear liquid at the top with not a lot of debris floating around. And then you just put them through a sieve. And I like to take a wrung out face cloth and push it up against the bottom of the sieve to wick out excess moisture. Then using a spoon, I scoop them onto an unglazed paper plate and just push them down into a flat patty. And I'm pretty brave at this. So I will get one paper plate and put 5 different varieties. So 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and one in the middle, and maybe draw a little circle around with the pen so that if somehow that little seed pad gets lodged, I can guess the shape of it. I've been saving seeds for 40 years and I've only had a few surprises. If you have cats, be careful about where you place your plates because I have had cats upend my plates and ruin my seed saving for those varieties for the year. Then I leave them just so if you look behind me, you'll see my shelf in my office. And I'll just place them on that shelf for a week. And then I will remove the little pad of seeds and put them on a fresh paper plate with nothing else on it and crumble them up. The seeds, when you ferment seeds, they separate beautifully into individual seeds and then store them. So let's talk about storage. But before I get to that, I want to talk about two other methods of seed saving. Um, One of them, I've received a lot of seeds from people that have used this, and the other, I haven't known too many people that use it, but it can be done. So the one on the left is if you just cut your tomato and scoop out seeds and press them into a paper towel or a piece of newspaper, and they will dry. That gel will eventually kind of go away and dry up. The problem is then you've got tomato seeds stuck to paper towel or newspaper. Now, if this is for your own use, this is fine. You can click them into little pieces and put them in your storage file. If you're going to share them with other gardeners, um, and as I've been a seed saver long enough and have requested enough varieties to have received little scraps of newspaper with seeds on it, it's really just really tough to store them that way. The weird thing is, as awful as the seeds look, they germinate fine. The other one, I'm just showing the OxyClean on the right, but the method is you squeeze the tomatoes in a cup and add water, and then you put in an amount of OxyClean and stir it around and let it sit for, I think it's 30 minutes or so. And then you have to decant that off and add a little bit of bleach, and then you have to time that carefully and let that sit for a while. And then you just decant it away and do the same thing as when you do a fermentation. The OxyClean bleach method is for people that they're impatient and they don't want to wait for that 3-4 days for the fermentation to take place. I like to ferment. I like the fact that the fermentation, I believe, does remove some possible seed-borne pathogens. The OxyClean and bleach may as well, but I haven't seen a lot of research with that. So there are varieties. It's not easy to find the specific method of doing the OxyClean bleach method, but it is out there. And if people are interested, you can email me and I'll send you the link. Now I'm going to raise this because I just mentioned something interesting. There are certain diseases that can get into vegetable seeds. And the one I'll focus on at the moment, because it tends to give the most angst, are various tomato diseases. There's so many of them. There's viral, and there's bacterial, and there's fungal. There's a couple of things missing, I think, out there. The master list of what diseases can get into which seed. I've never found it. It's piecemeal and it's very inconsistent. But what I have found is this method that before you plant your seeds, you can put them in a water permeable sack and immerse them in a hot water bath, or use a sous vide to bring a bowl of water to 122 degrees and immerse the seeds for 25 minutes. Then you remove them and you dry them, and then you will have removed particularly things like septoria leaf spot and perhaps fusarium wilt, perhaps early blight. So this is a thing to keep in mind. I have not been a hot water seed treatment because my gardens have grown just fine. But if you're really dependent on a really high yield and disease has been a real problem, it may be something to try. As far as seed storage, I am really unfancy about it. I have been fancier in the past, but it comes down to economics and convenience. And I found that if I put dried down seeds in small coin envelopes, you can write on them so you can label them. And because they're made of paper, if there is any moisture in the seed, it will wick it out and then it will air dry. And I've had tomato seeds stored like this that has lasted me 12 to 14 years. Now, there is a really sharp drop off at seeds that are stored at room temperature right around year 14, 15, 16 ordinarily, but that's a long time. At one point in my life, I was getting these plastic vials. I'll show a picture of them out of this case in a minute. The problem, and I had a friend, Jerry, who was making me these really nice wooden cases to store them in, but I had so many seeds that there's no way he could. I would have had to pay him a fortune to make me the number of wooden cases because I have thousands and thousands of seed samples. Now, when I was working in the lab, the other thing I also had are these little chemical vials or ampules, which are made of glass. So what's good about these is they keep moisture out. Um, what's bad about them is you have to have some way to store them so you can actually find what's in them. The other problem I had with the snap top plastic ones is after about 4 or 5 years, the quality of the plastic degraded so that when you opened up the vial, the cover just broke into several pieces. Now, this isn't to make anybody hungry, and I don't even know when I took this picture of what's in my fridge. But the point here is if you dry your seeds down well and put them in one of those plastic or glass containers or a little glassine plastic envelope and store them in the fridge, you probably can get 25 or 30 years out of your dried down seeds. And if you decide to store them in your freezer, you can probably get 50 years or more. So freezing is the way that people who are worried about keeping samples of seed for a long, long time do it. You just have to make sure you dry it down using silica gel really, really well. And then when you want to plant these seeds, if you bring them out of the fridge or the freezer, make sure they warm up to the temperature of the room before you open them up, or else moisture will get sucked in, and moisture is the enemy of seeds and will reduce their lifespan. Of course, maybe the most famous seed vault of all is the Svalbard in Norway. And although I do worry that some of the permafrost around this is starting to get a little bit shaky, but there's a lot of seed stored in here. So this is essentially was designed to be somewhat of the Noah's Ark of seeds. So that if the crap hit the fan on the world, if we had some kind of a horrible disease epidemic hit certain crops, this is where the seeds would be to get us going again. And yes, Cherokee Purple is sitting in here. So a lot of the varieties from Seed Savers Exchange, a lot of the really well-known heirlooms are sitting in here, but I've never been invited to come in and take a look. So given those seed storage methods, there's another really important aspect. How do you know what you've got in your vials? And you can certainly write on the side with Sharpie. You can write in a label and tape it. The problem is almost everything degrades over time. And so, and I used to use the little sticky dots and write on them. And then if I look at my old seed right now, I can barely read it. So it's another reason I went to the coin envelopes. But you need a system. And so this is one page of many, many, many for my Excel spreadsheets. And you'll see I have my tomato identity number on the very left. So seed number 1 in my seed collection is Sweet 100 Hybrid that I purchased from Stokes in 1986. And then I have a column for when I grew it out. So I have a system here, and I have a system for my save seeds. And for those, I use a letter to designate the crop. So peppers are P, tomatoes are T. And then the year that I grew it out. So this year I have T23 dash, and then I have an identity number, T23-1 to T23-195, etc. It's all cross-referenced to an Excel spreadsheet, which is backed up in numerous locations on a memory drive, on a portable hard drive, on my Google Drive, on my laptop. I talked about this a little at the beginning, but this is important to know. Tomato seeds will last 12 to 14 years. Zucchini, looking at the literature out there, or summer squash or pumpkins, seem like they have a longevity of about 4 years, maybe a little bit more. Same with Swiss chard. Eggplant, a little bit less, 3 years. Peppers, sweet peppers in particular, 2, 3, maybe 4 years, corn maybe 4 years. But I got these numbers off different websites, and the data is all over the place, and it's not consistent, and it's not always consistent with what I've found. So I have grown Swiss chard from seeds older than 4 years. I've grown hot peppers from seeds older than 6 years. So in part, this is just something you have to play with to find out. I think the good news is you've at least got a minimum time that seed will be good, and it could be for much longer. And if you throw it in the fridge or the freezer, then you will get more time out of it. So this is a fun little section because I've found through the years that there's a lot of BS in some of the seed catalogs. So first of all, there is a document or a website put together by Dave's Garden called the Garden Watchdog. And just Google Garden Watchdog and you'll find it. And this is kind of the Google review ratings for seed companies, where people who buy seeds from these companies will go in and they'll put down if they've had an issue. So if you've got this array of seed companies you want to try out for different things, I would go to the Garden Watchdog and put it in. Why do I like Victory Seeds so much? They're extremely well documented, and they're really accurate, and they've got all kinds of information. This is a testament to Mike, and it's also going to be a testament to Dave, because they're both very accuracy and truth is very important to them both when we're talking about varieties. Variety histories don't need to be made up. Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. In most cases, they have either fairly complete or very complete histories with lots of good information. So in other words, I have implicit trust in Victory Seeds and in Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. So now I'm not going to mention any seed company names, but I'm going to give you 3 examples of what can go wrong. So this is right story, wrong tomato. Well, maybe it's not the right story, because I'm looking at here the stupefyingly brilliant orange fruit of Golden Queen. Well, Golden Queen is a kind of a pale to medium bright yellow tomato. And what is being shown here is probably the variety Jubilee or Sunray, which is an orange tomato. Here's an example of right tomato, wrong story. So this is orange Russian 117. I've grown it. This is exactly orange 117 picture-wise, but this gorgeous tomato hails from the famous seed bank of the former Soviet Union. No, it was bred by one of my gardening friends in California in maybe the 1990s or so, by crossing a bicolor tomato with a variety called Russian 117 that was acquired from the Seed Savers Exchange. So why do these things bother me? In this case, it bothers me because it's the wrong tomato. In this case, it bothers me because the history is misleading. And gardening is about building community, and it's about telling stories. And I think accuracy of those stories is very important. And then we have right tomato, wrong history. So that is indeed White Queen. I remember getting that out of the USDA collection and growing it. And this says White Queen, it was introduced by the Livingston Seed Company in 1882. Livingston never released a white tomato. It was the Earl May Company that released the variety White Queen in the late 1920s. So this company got White Queen mixed up with Golden Queen, and it ended up with this convoluted mess where people think they're growing this historic tomato from Livingston, but they're not. If you have any questions about the veracity of tomato information, or you want to learn up history of what you're growing, you can go to Tatiana's Tomato Base, which is a tomato wiki. You can just type in the name of the tomato in that little box. It's totally free, no ads. And what's great about it is it gives you most everything that's known about that variety, including many pictures from people that have grown it. And because this is a wiki, people just contribute entries to it. The Seed Savers Exchange, what you can sign up for and use, and this isn't the commercial part that sells the seeds. This is the exchange. You can do the same thing. You log in, you got to get a login for it. And when you log in, you can type in the name of beans, tomatoes, you name it. You can get the history of them, the descriptions, and you can find out ways to obtain those seeds from the people listing them. In terms of looking at a seed pack, look on the left, Johnny selected seeds, Sun Gold F1. If it's a hybrid, it should have that designation, which means first filial generation, F1 hybrid. If you look at the packet on the right, it doesn't say, and there's no F and number. So you know that that is an heirloom or a open pollinated or a conventional variety. Why this is important, it's not that hybrids, heirlooms, open pollinators are better or worse, is as when we were talking about the seed library, you can't grow hybrids, save seeds from them and assume you're going to get the same tomato. Whereas if you want to tell stories from your garden, build community with your garden, and be a seed sharer and a seed saver, you need to look for heirlooms or open pollinated. A lot of the catalog information also will indicate growth habit for squash. Is it sprawling? Is it bush type? It's really important with tomatoes because if you're growing indeterminate tomatoes, you have to be ready for your garden to be taken over. You have to find a way to support it. You have to learn about suckers. If it's a determinate or dwarf tomato, it will stay in control and you can grow it in a small container if you want. I'll just touch on this briefly about seeds because this is it's not scary to plant seeds. For tomato seeds, it takes a month to get from a planted seed to a transplant, 1 month to get from a transplant to planting it out. And the other thing that's cool is my little hack about planting seeds. You can plant lots of seeds in a little cell. You can plant 50 tomato seeds or a whole big pinch of lettuce seeds or 10 beet seeds or pepper seeds or herb seeds. Let them grow all together, keep them happy, and then just transplant them out into the individual containers. And it's a real space-saving method. Just to briefly touch on where we are with the dwarf tomato breeding project, it's still going. Maybe the interesting news about this is I'm now in contact with Hatchet/Story Publishing. Story itself now has become Hatchet. So they've been purchased and so they're part of the Hatchet world of publishing. But I'm working out now the contract to write my third book, which will be about the dwarf tomato breeding project. And I've updated the side to put 2023, and I can update the number soon. At the bottom, it will say 157 plus varieties because Victory is about to release at least 7 new varieties of dwarfs, probably within the next month. They have, if you go to Victory and look at their categories of tomatoes, you can get just the whole set of dwarf tomatoes, which is really nice. And you can filter them by alphabet and things like that. So I think this fit nicely into the hour. My 2 books are here. The dwarf book will be number 3. Signed copies of these are available to me. The same deal holds. You can get both books plus some seeds for $25. I just need your mailing address, and you can do PayPal, Venmo, Zelle. I'm here because of Walter on the left and Wilfred on the right. They instilled the love of gardening in me when I was very, very young. So you all have a job, and that is to go grow a gardener. My contact info, I just did the mother of all blogs. I've started a series of summarizing my 2023 garden. I just did The Indeterminate Tomatoes Are Grew in My Yard, and it's a book. But if you want to see pictures, if you want to hear how I felt about all of the different tomatoes I grew back there, part one is up there. It's just craiglehoulier.com, nctomatoman@gmail.com for my email. My live weekly Instagrams are over, but you never know when I'm going to pop on. But they're all there. All four years worth of them can be found at my @nctomatoman Instagram account. Go to my profile and look at the center menu item, which is the videos. There's all of my Instagram lives. Growing Epic Tomatoes is out there and available to take. You can get a discount on it. It's just Joe Lample's Organic Gardening Academy. And as we do questions, I'll flip through these next two slides. This is my latest list of my favorite tall growing tomatoes. And two of them, one snuck on last year, Captain Lucky, and one snuck back on this year, Potato Leaf Yellow. But anyway, if I was in person, I'd be able to look at all of you in the eye and thank you for being here. Now I can just do it virtually, but I so appreciate you attending. For those of you who'll be watching this after the fact, thank you very much. Just ask questions. And again, Joanne, thank you so much for asking me to do this.
Oh my gosh, thank you. This was fantastic. I really appreciate all your knowledge. We just have a few questions, and
Sure.
one of them is how many years do the straw bales last?
Great. So straw bales have become my favorite way of gardening. My container use is going down as the straw bale is going up just because of the performance I have. However, you get one growing season out of growing in them as they are. By the end of the season, my 1.5 foot tall tomato straw bales were about 6 to 8 inches because they compress down, you're feeding them, you're watering them. But then what you get is this beautiful bale of perfect loam. And this year I used the spent bales to put in 20-gallon containers and put 4 little pieces of seed potato in. And I picked 10 to 15 pounds of potatoes in each bag. You can grow garlic in them. You can augment your containers using it to mix with your. So they're like a perfect thing because you get great performance the first year, and then you get perfect compost and loam to use for all of your future gardening. So I love
That's
them.
so interesting.
Yeah.
We also have a question which was regarding annual flower seeds.
Mm,
Mark asks, do they last as long as vegetable seeds? You've gone over vegetable
yeah.
seeds. What about
Yeah.
flowers?
So annual flower seeds are analogous to vegetable seeds in that it depends. So for example, I have some hibiscus that I've been collecting for years, and some I collected in 2007, 2008. This is 16 years later, and I still got some germination on them. And I've got some other types of flowers. I'm trying to think here, some marigolds and some zinnias that after 2 or 3 years almost completely lost their viability. So whereas I put on there a chart for vegetable seeds, I think if one were to do a little Googling around, and I can do the work for you and you can email me, or I can give it to Joanne to post, I can probably find you a similar set of information of reasonable, but probably not perfect reliability for flower seeds. I just don't think that flower seeds have quite the longevity because so many of them are tiny. They're like as tiny as dust. I'm thinking of things like lisianthus and snapdragons. But as you can tell, I love growing flowers just as much as I like growing vegetables. But I don't think they have the oomph. They don't have the protective shell. They don't have the nutritional stuff that's keeping that seed going. Whereas tomatoes and peppers and eggplant are a little bit more finite in what you can see. But I don't know if that correlates at all, but it's just something that came to mind. But there's just a few things for you to chew on. But great question. Thank you.
One question about a slicing tomato problem this year. Had a
Mhm.
bunch of tomatoes with a hard white center.
Mm.
Cherry tomatoes, not a problem. Do you have any idea what caused this?
Yeah, so when you get the hard centers in the slicing tomatoes, there are several places that can sneak in. It's either a genetic fault of that particular variety. It could be that the seed source for that particular variety wasn't of the highest quality. More often than not, it's probably the growing conditions during the year. Something checked the growth of that plant, and it could have been water was withheld at some point, or it could have been a temperature thing. It also could be a storage thing. So the reason I say that is I used to go to the Raleigh Farmers Market and we buy some of our produce there. And I remember buying German Johnson that looked beautiful on the outside. And when I cut them open, they were virtually inedible. The whole inside was white and firm. And what I think they may have done is pick them green and ripen them over time, but they just weren't handled very well in that storage. So there's a few different things. If you've grown that variety in the past and haven't had the problem, then it's probably condition related. If it's the first time you've grown it and you have the problem, but other people have claimed that it's great, I would change my seed source.
Okay, and then finally we have,
Mhm.
well, two questions real quick. Does the DT project have any participants in Norway?
We have people all the dwarf tomato breeding project. We have people all over the world, and at some time we have had people from Norway on it, but we're always looking to bring more people on. So if they want to send me an email, and then I can look through our whole roster of volunteers and maybe even do a connection if I can find the one or two people from Norway that have helped us out. But we're always trying to get people from different European countries to help because not even just with the dwarf tomato breeding project, but just getting some of the varieties to them so that they can make sure that they're available in their country. These are things that need to be available to everyone everywhere. And, I have a friend, Lance, in England who is selling lots of them. The problem is seed import rules really do get in the way sometimes. That's why we can't collaborate with Australia anymore. They don't allow seeds from America into Australia unless you get a phytosanitary certificate, which just is ridiculously costly. So, but yeah, get in contact with me, nctomatoman@gmail.com. We'll see what we can do.
And finally, how thick do the dwarf stalks get, and what are your best broad for soil nutrients for growing tomatoes? Broad
Good,
advice, sorry,
sure.
for soil nutrients.
So first, you reminded me to put up this slide, which is based on flavor alone. These are now my favorite. So think we got 157 dwarf varieties. These are the, let me see. Yeah, these are the 12 that I like to eat the best. So you can take a picture of that or write them
Okay.
down. Um, so the central stem can get to be about an inch thick. The way I like to think about a dwarf is it behaves just like an indeterminate, but it grows upward at half the height. So, sometimes people will say, I grew a dwarf and it got to, 6 feet tall by the end of the year. And and I will say, how much sun did you get? Well, 3 or 4 hours of sun in a very, very long growing season. Well, how tall was your sun gold or your Cherokee purple at that point? Well, 12 feet, 14 feet. So that half height is more important than absolute height for each because we don't know. Conditions can vary too much. And as far as what I feed my tomatoes with, I'm, good quality seed, good quality transplants, regular watering, and regular feeding. And really, I just use a balanced food, NPK. I'm not strictly organic, so I'm not doing a lot of research on what I feed them with. I'm not changing my food as the season goes on, so I'm not switching from nitrogen at first and then bumping up the phosphorus or the potassium later. Every week, my plants get, a cup and a half of a diluted all-purpose food, and they just do great. They flower all season, they fruit all season, they set fruit. But that's me. And I grow in straw bales and containers, so I'm not working to build up soil because what I grow in is just going to be moved into something else. So I think it's different philosophies in terms of what you put in the soil if you're growing in the soil versus just somebody who's using a temporary place to plant their plants. I can be a little bit lazier and simpler about what I do.
Excellent. I think that wraps it up.
Good.
I want to thank you so much, Craig. This has been a wonderful episode of seed saving. I learned so much. And for those of you who are local in Darien, Darien Library has a seed library, and I just got some seeds for fall gardening. So if you have any cool weather plants, we've got lettuce and arugula and
Mhm.
radishes and a couple others. So anyway, thank you so much. Appreciate it, everyone. Happy gardening, and that's it. Have a
Bye,
good night.
everybody.
Okay, bye.